Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist, and I'm joined by
City Hall reporter Joshua Fechter,
business editor and columnist Greg Jefferson,
reporter Brian Chasnoff.
And got a lot to talk about this week. Before we do, Greg, I wanted to mention this. I don't think we got a chance to talk about this last week, but the Express News recently debuted a special Sunday business section, and I wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about that, because I'm sure that there are some readers who've started to notice that. And what was the idea behind that, and what should people look for?
The idea behind it was to come up with a product that was better than Fortune magazine, but for the San Antonio market. So that's what we did. We've got San Antonio Inc., which is, it replaces our Sunday business section. And it gives us a chance to add more columnists to the mix. So in addition to my column and Michael Taylor's column on kind of the economy and investment, we've also got Madison Eisler writing about commercial real estate in town, and Randy Diamond writing about business travel. The idea is to give us a little more space for some deeper reporting and really strong writing on business issues in San Antonio, particularly at this time with so much in flux right now. Yeah, we just wanted, we wanted a publication that could, take a breath and put all of the changes we're seeing both in kind of the broader economy and in specific industries into perspective. So we launched it 2 weeks ago. It's going to appear every Sunday, and so far it's looking pretty good. I think we had, we had a really good cover illustration by Jeremiah Teutsch. It was of Wayne Peacock of USAA and Gilbert. You'll of course remember Jeremiah from our Plaza de Armas days. He's a great illustrator.
No, he's great. He is. I just want to say a little pop trivia. I think he's related to Joaquin Carrasco or something like that. Anyway, I think he's like a cousin or something, but I could be getting that wrong.
Really?
Go ahead.
Okay, so you know more about young Jeremiah than I do. But we want to use his talents a lot more. So look for it every Sunday. It's been pretty good so far, if I do say so myself.
Yeah. Highly recommended. I'm sure it's added to your workload quite a bit, but anyway.
I'm sure the pay will be commensurate with that, right?
Right. Well, okay. So as we're moving from Greg's fiscal issues, we're going to go to the city and VIA and their fiscal concerns. We've talked a lot about the issue of a sales tax referendum that would provide more money for VIA. And Ron Nirenberg had supported this, had advocated for that for quite a while. And then in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, had stepped away and said that this wasn't the right time. And the VIA board, in its other guise as the Advanced Transportation District Board, recently voted to move forward with a sales tax referendum in November. And so you had a conflict between VIA and the city and the mayor of San Antonio, which was looking to be really problematic for the election. And last week, it looked like that conflict was resolved. Josh, what happened with that?
So, that's a good recap. And, basically what happened last week is, the mayor and VIA struck a deal to basically go ahead with the sales tax election in November, but with a couple of sort of tweaks, obviously. So the mayor is going to be pushing this his own basically sales tax election that will allow him to tap that 8-cent sales tax for purposes of doing sort of economic recovery efforts for the next 3 or so years. as it's sort of pertains to fallout from the coronavirus. And then the deal is that after that 3 years, and this will also be on the ballot in some form in November, that VIA will then get will then be able to tap that sales tax for their own purposes, for expanding public transit, for expanding bus service, and there had been some back and forth after the VIA board sort of had kind of revolted against the mayor. They struck this deal, I'm told, sometime between July 10th and July 12th. So this deal's only about a week old. But it's interesting because it's back on the November ballot after the mayor had said we're just not going to deal with that this year. It seems that VIA to some degree sort of forced his hand on tapping the sales tax. But there was also the component, under state law, you couldn't have this in May as the mayor had wanted to do in terms of figuring out what to do with that sales tax, because apparently under state law you cannot have a sales tax election within 6 months of another sales tax election, and the PreK for SA election was on the November ballot. So there's a degree of urgency at work here.
Yeah. Well, one of the things too that I think was interesting is that you were looking at the possibility of a PreK. If they had not reached an agreement here, you would have had a PreK for SA renewal election. You would have the mayor putting forward his own sort of economic recovery sales tax referendum, and VIA having their own. And so you would have sort of three sales tax elections, and there was really only enough money for two. And I think there were concerns out there that, which of these would pass? Would the confusion and conflict, would it end up killing all of them in some way? I mean, I don't know if that would have been the case. I think PreK for SA is probably, has a lot of support now, but I think there was a lot of concern that this was just going to be kind of a nightmare scenario on the ballot. I mean, were you hearing anything like that?
And I've heard that this may actually prove harmful to PreK's chances. They had wanted PreK to be on a ballot where it didn't have to contend with this transit sales tax election. That's why it was previously on the ballot in May. And obviously the coronavirus, shot that plan down. And so, PreK is kind of back where it started, kind of being on the same ballot as this thing. They did not want to be anywhere near it. Yeah. But, in terms of confusion, as I understand it, there will still be a degree of separation here. City council will have to call its own election on the economic recovery aspect, and VIA will have to call its own. VIA or the ATD will have to call their own election for using the sales tax after that. So you're still going to have, unless there's some other solution that I'm not hearing about, you're going to have these three items on the ballot together separately. Yeah.
It's just that now there's going to be enough money for all of it since the VIA part will come later. Yeah,
it'll be separated. It'll be somewhere down the road.
And I know that I just from emails I get, people keep wondering, and you've reported on this, but I think there's probably some uncertainty out there in the community about where this leaves Aquifer Protection and the linear creekways, because this had been this sales tax that the mayor is going to put forward. I mean, this is basically taking what had funding that had gone to that and now putting it into this economic recovery plan. So as things stand now, I mean, the Aquifer Protection funding, I mean, that's the city is trying to find that in its general fund, or this is not right. It's not going to be a sales tax.
No. So, to refresh people's memories a bit, the mayor spent, the first couple of months of this year trying to find a home for the Aquifer Protection program. The proposal that he had settled on, that city council appeared to be amenable to, was basically just continuing the program at about half the cost using, city's general fund dollars. They were going to vote on it in April, but then this thing called COVID-19 started popping up. So as far as I know, that there's still the plan to go forward with that plan when that actually happens, when city council actually votes on it. That'll be, I guess that'll be determined. We're not sure when that's going to happen yet. Right. And as part of that plan, there was a discussion about getting the county to basically take over to some degree the linear trails, creekways program from the city. I have not heard any other developments on that front.
Gotcha. Well, pivoting toward to the national election, I think that there's been a lot of focus in over the last several days about the presidential election, and particularly in Texas. We've seen Joe Biden, the presumptive Democratic nominee, leading by double digits over Donald Trump in most national polls, and in Texas polls, it's basically looking like a toss-up. I mean, there've been some polls where Biden's down by a point. One had him up by 5 points. And you sense that Democrats who've not, we haven't had a Democratic nominee carry the state in 44 years. Democrats are really serious this year and think they have a chance. And along those lines, we saw Joe Biden unveil an ad for the Texas market last week, which again is unusual for a Democratic nominee to use resources on Texas, which is people have just assumed that there's no chance. I mean, Brian, you've been covering politics in Texas, and you've followed these elections. We saw Beto O'Rourke come close in 2018 to taking Ted Cruz's Senate seat. When you look at this and the efforts that Joe Biden is making, I mean, do you think that there's a legitimate shot that Texas could swing this year?
What struck me about that ad was Biden is simply acknowledging reality. Mm-hmm. And I think that, it's refreshing for me. I would think it's refreshing for a lot of Texans who are really suffering right now with this pandemic and the economic fallout, the public health implications. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you're seeing a lot of acknowledgement of basic reality from the White House right now. So I do think that, this could go a long way towards swaying folks, maybe even those who had supported the president initially back in 2016. And I think, it's a basic article of faith that Texas is turning, if not blue, then purple. And I think that the bungled response to the pandemic has created quite an opening for Democrats. Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things that struck me about the ad was how the tone was very presidential. It was almost more like a president's address to the country, or in this case, a state, advising people on how to stay safe during the pandemic, saying that the big message. I think the big line was, this pandemic is tough, but Texas is tougher. And sort of, it was almost like a kind of a Franklin Roosevelt, we're going to get through this type of thing. We're all going to do it together. Yeah. And it was much more the tone of a president than a candidate. And I think that that's probably the best shot he has, I think, in this state and in the national election, which is to kind of come across as the adult in the room, to not necessarily try to match insults with Donald Trump, but to kind of take that sort of tone to create a contrast between him and Trump. I mean, Greg, what's your sense about
well, I keep thinking back. Well, I keep thinking back to Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick's reelection in 2018 and how close that was. And I wonder if it's instructive about, what Trump's chances are in 2020. I mean, as you'll recall, Dan Patrick barely won re-election to kind of a no-name candidate. It was, it was a typical Democratic statewide nominee. Nobody had ever heard of him. He was underfunded. And, the joke was, when he went back to work after the election, all of his coworkers asked him, "So what have you been up to?" And that's, and to that candidate whose name, obviously, I cannot even remember. Dan Patrick, if you remember, it helped me out. But I mean, Dan Patrick carried what, 52% of the vote. I mean, that was, that was a real rejection of his politics in a sense. I mean, that's how you could look at it. I mean, I think it's interesting that, Biden is being pushed to make investments in states like Texas that, that had been, previously considered kind of GOP strongholds. I don't know that on, without that kind of pressure from outside of his campaign, he would have aired this ad, but he did, and we'll see what kind of traction he gets from it. I mean, I think we're definitely in interesting times, and it does seem like kind of the GOP hold on Texas is loosening a bit.
Right.
It's Mike Collier, Greg.
Yeah. Thank you, Luis, who's producing our show today.
You looked that up. You didn't know.
Mike Collier was Dan Patrick's opponent. Thank you so much for that. And I didn't remember either. I got to be honest.
Right. Yeah.
One of the things too about. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, but something I wonder about in Texas. That's sort of driving sort of Biden's performance here is not only Trump's response to the pandemic, but also Governor Abbott. I would want to know, and I would love to see this in future polling, like how many of those, voters that are going for Biden are dissatisfied with how, the governor has handled this. We've seen just how halting and disorganized this response has been, as you see the surge and as you see, the impact that this is having on Texas economy. I wonder how much that's playing a role here.
It's a great point.
Right. Well, and we've already seen from a UT poll a couple of weeks ago that Governor Abbott's taken a real hit as a result of the response. I mean, he's down in 39% approval rating from north of 50. So
just for a couple of months
he's
before.
Already paid a price.
Yeah. And I mean, at the very least, what Biden is doing is, he's going to make Trump have to fight to defend this state, which is something that Republicans generally have not had to do. Another interesting a story on the presidential race, which has a San Antonio component, is that the Lincoln Project, which is basically a group of disaffected Republicans who have been doing a series of just scathing ads on Donald Trump. Probably the most vicious and maybe the most effective ads, which have just basically been targeted at making Donald Trump look horrible. They announced last week that the members of the Lincoln Project leadership team, and one of the members is Lionel Sosa, who is from San Antonio and basically built a career doing advertising for Republican candidates. And I think he did ads, Spanish language ads and Latino targeted ads for almost every presidential candidate from 1980 to about 2008 or so. He's one of the staunch Republicans that we've seen in this area who have become really unhappy with the direction of the party, and particularly with Donald Trump and his position on immigration, for example. So I think that is going to be something to follow as we go forward. On the while we're talking about Trump, another San Antonio related story. We learned last week that Brad Parscale, who was formerly from San Antonio, lived in San Antonio for close to 20 years, and was a web designer here. And Donald Trump picked him to created his website for the 2016 election, made him his digital campaign director later. And because of the sort of praise that Pascal got for that, Trump ended up making him his campaign manager for this election cycle. The stories have been going out, which Pascal had been denying for a while, that Trump was really angry with him. He was, because of the poll numbers, and was blaming him and yelling at him. And there were denials both from Trump and from Pascal about that. But last week, Pascal was demoted back to his old job as digital director. He will no longer be campaign manager. This seemed like one of those things that we all could see this coming. It was just a matter of like what day this was going to happen. Greg, any thoughts on our, and you know, he lives in Florida now, but Pascal is still very connected to San Antonio. His dad lives here. Yeah.
And plus, you know, he's such good copy. We're just going to claim him anyway. I don't care if he's living in, I don't care. Yeah. He's true. He's a good font of news, you know, so we're going to hang on to him. Yeah, no, I mean, it's, as with, you know, any Trump appointee, the moment they get appointed, the clock is ticking, and you just wonder how long it's going to be till they're, you know, publicly humiliated by the president and removed. It took a while in this case, but yeah, I mean, this was a slow motion train wreck. I mean, you know, everybody knew this was coming for a long time. Even before the pandemic, there were a lot of grumbles about, you know, within the Trump camp of discontent, you know, hearing that Jared Kushner, whose opinion apparently really matters in the Trump circle, wasn't happy with Pascal's performance. So, yeah, I mean, this was in some ways inevitable. And it didn't help that, you know, Pascal was seen as kind of cultivate, you know, he was kind of mirroring Trump in a way. Like he was very careful about developing his own brand. You know, I mean, you saw, plenty of profiles, including, you know, a long one in the New Yorker just on Pascal. That's, you know, for a president like Trump, for a president like Trump, that's not a good move to get yourself profiled by a bunch of media outlets. He prefers all of the spotlight for himself. So that too, I think, kind of fed into, you know, all the discontent with Pascal.
Yeah, and the thing that was interesting is that, you know, those of us who knew him a little bit before he got involved in presidential politics, I mean, he was really an apolitical guy. He had never voted in a primary election in Bexar County until 2016 when Donald Trump was on the ballot. And the only thing he really was known for as far as politics, if you could even call it that, was that he was one of a group of business people really pushing Ivy Taylor in 2015 to make sure that she brought Lyft and Uber back to San Antonio after they left for a while. He was really big on the ride sharing industry, and that was like a big thing for him. But he was not a real political guy, and it was a strange thing to watch him in a period of short time. He's now managing presidential campaigns, and it was nothing, and maybe not the best fit. But as you said, this was probably inevitable.
He and Jared Kushner were very close.
Yeah,
so that might have stuck him around a little bit longer.
He hung around longer than he would have otherwise. Before we wrap things up, I wanted to just kind of update things on District 23, the U.S. congressional race, which probably about half the votes are here in San Antonio. It's a really sprawling district that covers 29 counties, but you know, the bulk of them are here in San Antonio. And it's the Republican runoff between Tony Gonzalez and Raul Reyes Jr. Republicans are trying to hold on to the seat, which has been held by Will Hurd. Democrats have Gina Ortiz Jones on the November ballot, and they're very excited about their prospects for flipping that district. Where do things stand now, Josh? I know you covered this. This is probably the closest congressional race that I can remember in this area. Where do things stand now?
So right now, I mean, not much has changed since last week. You know, you're still seeing Tony Gonzalez ahead with a 7-point lead, but obviously we're waiting to see the results from absentee ballots, from mail-in ballots. Today is, as we're recording this, it's Monday the 20th, and we're waiting on basically this is the last day for those ballots to come in. So we should know the results here sort of shortly, at least preliminarily. And, if you're listening to this podcast right now, you probably already know.
You know more than we do. So, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
We're like a time capsule.
A 7-vote difference out of about 25,000. And so, I mean, you would look at it and think if there were, a reasonable number of mail-in or absentee ballots, that Raul Reyes would have a chance. On the other hand, Bexar County was really good for Tony Gonzalez. He lives in San Antonio. He did well here. That you could say that was really the key to his victory if he ends up holding on. And so if we get a substantial number of absentee and military ballots here, it could work to his advantage. I think that his campaign is very confident, and in a move that's reminiscent of the 2000 presidential election between Al Gore and George W. Bush, Tony Gonzalez has lawyered up in the last week. His campaign announced a ballot integrity legal team to handle any questions that come up about this. So it could be that that this will all be settled in the next couple of days. But if not, Tony Gonzalez is prepared to fight this thing in court if he has to.
Right. And, and don't count out the possibility of a recount, in Texas, if the margin between, if you're the runner up, if the margin between you and the winner is less than 10% of the winner's, total votes, you can call a recount. So,
yeah. The thing about this is that unlike some states that have, automatic recounts, if it's within a certain range, in Texas, there's only an automatic recount if there's an actual tie, a literal tie. And so he, as you say, Raul Reyes could call for a recount, but I mean, this would be something he'd have to pay for him. So this is what Gina Ortiz-Jones was dealing with because she had a really close race with Will Hurd, and she, I think, thought about it and ultimately decided not to go forward with that.
Right. And so once this grueling nomination is done, all the winner has to do, whether it's Reyes or Gonzalez, is beat Gina Ortiz-Jones in the fall, which is going to be quite a trick. I mean, I think she's got to be considered the front runner at this point. I mean, she's got the most experience campaigning in the district. She's proven herself to be a really effective fundraiser, and she seems kind of connected at the grassroots. So whoever gets it, they're not going to have an easy time.
It's going to be tough. And the thing that I go back to is, Trump won the state in 2016. If we look at his coattails, he won the state in 2016 by about 9%, but he lost District 23 by roughly 3%. This time he's running even with the Democratic nominee. So you've got to believe that he's doing worse in District 23 than he did when he lost it to Hillary Clinton 4 years ago. So his coattails are really going to be, they're going to be a big problem for whoever the Republican nominee is. And I think one of the things I really am very interested in is because both Tony Gonzalez and Raul Reyes, Raul Reyes praised Trump a lot. Tony Gonzalez actually got Trump's endorsement. But I think whoever emerges from this runoff will, I think, would have to be pretty careful about not attaching themselves too much to Donald Trump, because it's those coattails could sink you, I think, in November. So we're going to leave things with that, and we'll probably know a lot more about that election in the next few days. So we'll be back next week. Appreciate you all listening. Hope you all are safe and well. Take care.